to come here, you know. The vision from the left coast can be that this is a backwater, this is all redneck, this is kind of hopeless, but to hear your successes, to hear your energy, to hear your innovative ideas, you really are, you know, part of what makes the Sierra Club tick and the best that it can be. And I know it's a hard row to hoe here, but I just want to thank all of you for making this happen, because obviously when you hear about the resources here, the endangered species, the rivers, the amount of water you've got, the amount of coal you've got, let's sequester it by keeping it in the ground. You know, we really need a vibrant Sierra Club, as well as all the community of people you work with, including the musicians. I do want to share a couple ideas and thoughts from outside of Alabama, though, because I know you can sit in front of your TV and watch what happened on election night, and this was a very exciting, great week for us, also a great relief. But sometimes when you see the things and hear the national news commentators, you really can't get an idea of what it means for our issues and what it means for the Sierra Club and how we need to now switch gears going forward. So yes, you know, if you look at it on the surface, you say, okay, well, it's the same set of players at the national level. We've still got President Obama in the White House, still have John Boehner sitting there in the House, blocking everything, still have Harry Reid, not particularly dynamic and moving things in the direction we want, still have Mitch McConnell trying to hold everything up with filibusters. So what has really changed? Well, frankly, a lot has changed. This national election that we just had doesn't give President Obama a mandate that he could just go drive everything through Congress, but at the same time, it doesn't leave things where they were. So think about it. One thing, President Obama doesn't have to run for re-election. So where he was looking over his shoulder before, where he was saying, gee, I'm not sure I can do that in my first term because it might piss some people off or I might lose that set of electoral votes, those are no longer concerns for him. Now he's playing the legacy. And eventually they'll treat him like a lame duck, and we'll be into the next election cycle, and they'll be concerned about who the nominees are for the White House rather than who's sitting in the White House. But we basically have 2 or 3 years here when we can really push forward things in a major way and get some real progress. Secondly, the future of Obamacare is no longer front and center. You know, that is now the law of the land, and their pipe dreams about repealing this are past. So we're going to have to figure out how to live with it and go on to other issues. And going on to other issues is going to be a very important thing for the country and for our leaders, and instead they don't have to be constantly nagging about this, because there's lots of other issues that are out there and it's time to address them. Third, if you thought back 2 years ago, you said, what's the biggest story? It's the Tea Party. And now, basically, the Tea Party is in decline and in disrepute. And so if you're a Republican and you're looking at this and you look at what happened to the Tea Party candidates in this last election, you're no longer thinking, oh my God, I've got to go follow their lead, or I'm going to have a primary challenger and I'm going to be the next one knocked out. But instead you start seeing people sort of saying, whoa, look what happened to Todd Akin, look what happened to these other people when you go too far to the right. So suddenly, you know, the John Boehners of the world are sitting and saying, how do I pull together the Republican Party so that we can actually have some gains in 2010? And it's not necessarily following this, what they thought was a tidal wave that actually was kind of a little blip in the whole thing. The other thing that's very different and very dynamic is that there were a number of key endangered Democrats who were acting scared. So John Tester of Montana now has a new 6-year lease on life. He doesn't have to run for election for another 6 years. Same with Claire McCaskill. You know, so there's people like that all around. Sherrod Brown in Ohio, you know, he's kind of wondering all the time, gee, how bold can I really be? And so these Democrats are suddenly people that can be a little bolder, be a little stronger, and then urge the president to do the same. The other thing is, even though people like to say, well, it's pretty much a wash, actually the Democrats picked up seats in the Senate, they picked up seats in the House, and that's a big deal. No, they don't have a supermajority in the Senate. No, they didn't take back a majority in the House. But if you look at it, those key additions are very important additions, not only in terms of the makeup of committees, but also there were a number of sort of trade-ups. So if you look at the people that won and the people they're replacing, it makes quite a difference in the overall greenness and complexion of the Congress, and as a result, some of the things that we'll see. So Jeff Bigeman, who was always a very good vote for us in the Senate, who's the chair of the Senate Energy and Environment Committee, instead we have Martin Heinrich replacing him as he retired. Martin Heinrich used to be on the Sierra Club XCOM in New Mexico, and he is one of our real champions. He's been regularly, voting 100%, putting in wilderness bills, running on the fact that we have to address climate change. So where Jeff Bigeman was always tepid and he kind of working out compromises and trying to figure out how to have a bill that addressed climate change that also dealt with clean coal and also dealt with nuclear, now we have somebody who really understands what a clean energy revolution looks like. Olympia Snow, bless her, she's gone. She was our moderate Republican that we kept lobbying, and she kept going along with the Republicans' party all the time in party line votes, because otherwise, she just felt she'd be ostracized. She's been replaced by Angus King. You might have just seen this and said, well, there was some independent that ran. This was an independent endorsed by the Sierra Club. This is an independent who was a wind power entrepreneur. This is an independent who ran a very pro-environment state government when he was the governor up in Maine. So we're really looking forward to, again, a trade up there and seeing the kind of progress. I don't need to tell you about Elizabeth Warren and what a difference that makes in Massachusetts. But here in Connecticut, Joe Lieberman, somebody else who was steadily a disappointment, somebody that would come together with John McCain and busy promote nuclear power, and instead, here we have Chris Murphy coming in, who's another dyed-in-the-wool environmentalist ready to really lead in the Senate. So these make very big differences for us, and I'm really quite hopeful about changing the tone and changing the debate and not letting them just kowtow. Whenever you'd have, suddenly people taking the floor and deciding that they're going to challenge climate change or something like that. I mean, they're not going to get away with it anymore. This isn't to say we're going to be able to pass things in the Congress, because I'm still certain that John Boehner and Mitch McConnell are going to be obstructionists. But it really does change the whole tone, and as a result, I think is going to embolden Obama. And as Obama starts doing things administratively, he's going to have support on the Hill rather than people that are constantly dragging him up there and reading him the Riot Act. The other thing is that even though the Republicans controlled a lot of the redistricting that took place, it's interesting to note that the Democrats were the ones that picked up seats. And I think that tells you something, again, about what's going on in this country. So even though we're going to have to live with those redistricting plans for some time, it also, I think, bodes well for us overall that we can run even in this changed environment and run successfully. I also want to say that our issues really made a difference in key races across the country. If you were to just look at the presidential debates, environment was hardly mentioned at all, and we kind of wondered whether it was an issue. But when you get down to some of these key contested Senate races and House races, in places like Florida, New Mexico, Colorado, Iowa, all across the board, Maine was another big one, Ohio, clean energy was one of the main things of discussion. And yes, people were busy talking about energy because they wanted to say, drill here, drill now, I'm in favor of all of the above. We need to have, have North America be energy independent, all this kind of stuff. But there were a key number of candidates that ran and said, it's all about clean energy. It's all about reauthorizing the production tax credit for wind energy and things like that. And those candidates ran on those platforms. We were in those states running ads against them, saying that these guys are for dirty energy, they're promoting coal, they're taking big oil and gas money. And ultimately, that was one of the key issues that turned those elections. So I think our issues are really resonating where they didn't in 2010. And that's a big deal for us. I think the biggest disappointment that we had from our priority races across the country on election night was something called Proposal 3 in Michigan. We went to the belly of the beast there. We basically said we want to run an initiative to mandate that 25% of power had to come from clean sources by 2025. So it was 25 by 25. Unfortunately, we did this as a constitutional amendment. And Michigan, this year, had 6 different constitutional amendments on there, and they all went down to defeat. And so I really think it wasn't a rejection of clean energy as much as it was a rejection of the idea that they just didn't want to amend the Constitution. Because as we ran poll after poll after poll, people were saying, we support this. But at the same time, even though we ran a big national campaign, we had a national day of action, and Sierra Club volunteers from all around the country were calling into Michigan. You know, we came up short there. But even though we did that, there were some other places where there was great success. In my present home state of California, we passed a proposition that basically closes a tax loophole, and as a result is going to bring in about $1 billion from out-of-state people that are selling their goods in California. Half of that money will go to clean energy and energy efficiency, the other half to go into the general fund. We also passed a new tax in California. You know, it's both a tax on people that earn over $250,000, state tax, but also a ½ sales tax for 7 years. And that money goes in to fund education and also to restore environmental programs in state government when we've got the $6 billion deficit looming. So the fact that people are willing to tax themselves even in this depressed economy and with this economic situation and the job situation, I think is really heartening. So I think those are all good things and what it means for us. But as I say, in the Congress, I don't really think we're going to make much difference because they still have the filibuster in the Senate. They still have the majority they need in the House, and the Republicans aren't about to break ranks on any major environmental things. So even things like passing popular wilderness bills, I just don't see it happening.